So a few questions come up the moment we think about these 5 principles. The first question is, when actually should we be mining? Because when we are mining, it's a one-time conversion between from the mineral into a permanent fund or land or gold or something else. We cannot create minerals, so we cannot go the other way. We must be very careful when we decide to convert minerals into something else, because we must remember that 30,000 generations before us have left the mineral as is. That is how we've inherited them. Most species live on average 30 million years, which means there's probably about 1 million generations after us. If we mine today, these minerals will not be available to 1 million generations of Goans after us. We must be sure that we're doing the right thing at this point in time. Some basic questions to ask. Is the price of the mineral high enough? Should we be mining when we're basically getting $1 a ton? Or should we say we need a minimum of $50 a ton? Because sure, prices may not be high today, but they will be high in the future. Second, can we actually do zero loss mining? Can we capture its full value? Are we sure that the mining companies will not steal some money? Can we sure we can control corruption? The center will not impose certain other kinds of taxes? Because, for instance, if the center said if the government imposed a 20% tax, if you sell your gold, would you sell your gold? You wouldn't. Who would pay the 20% tax? Exactly the same with minerals. Why would we sell it for less than its true value? Another question to ask is, are we sure that we can take all that we get from mining and put it into this new permanent fund? Or will anything get diverted? And lastly, can we ensure that this permanent fund can be protected in perpetuity? Not just reinvest for inflation, but also make sure that no politician or invader or anybody else steals away our money or fritters it away through mismanagement or gambling or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, it's only when we can do all of this does it make sense to convert minerals into a permanent fund which can give us a citizens' dividend. Another question that comes up frequently is zero loss mining actually possible? Well, there are 2 responses to this, or a few responses. First, we should say that in theory, if the government did the mining itself, it could auction off the contract to extract the mineral per ton under government directions, could auction off the mineral which is after extraction to any buyer, and the difference becomes the value of the mineral. It's a fairly transparent way to go about it, as long as corruption in the auction processes is controlled, which should be possible. A different way to think about it, in fact, is that whether we should be mining at all if we cannot guarantee no loss. Because if there is a loss, aren't we better off just leaving it as minerals and waiting for a time when our systems and processes or our laws are better, where we can guarantee no loss? And we should keep in mind that Chanakya in the Arthashastra did recommend that all mining should be done by the government. Essentially, that is the most obvious way of ensuring no losses. A simple question, why should we save all the money in the permanent fund? Why don't we spend it? And here are a few good reasons why we should be saving all the money in the permanent fund. Firstly, it is not the government's money, it is the people's money, and we should be saving it. It's the right thing to do. The second thing is, it also protects the budget from volatility. Let's go back to Saudi Arabia or Venezuela. When oil prices were very high, the government budgets increased tremendously. And this is actually a result of a little flaw in the accounting, where they say that whatever money they're getting from oil as royalty is actually income. No, it's obviously not income. You're selling off your family gold. That's not income. That's basically the sale of your asset. Anyway, they call it income. So when oil prices go up, the amount the governments are getting from oil increases. In turn, when the governments get a lot of money, all the people want either jobs or subsidies or other kinds of expenditure. So the government expenses rise in turn. Now, eventually, commodities crash. They're notoriously fickle. So when the commodity prices crash, the government budget shrinks dramatically. And the government really has two choices, or a few choices. One is it can start selling more and more oil, which frankly is a stupid thing to do. When prices are reduced, why would you sell more of your inheritance? You would actually sell less. But because the budget is in a hole, they have to sell more. And of course, when you're selling more and more oil in a market which is depressed, the prices are going only further down. Second option, cut expenditure. That's really, really difficult. How do you take away government jobs? How do you take back subsidies? What's your third option? Is to impose new taxes on people, typically who have never paid taxes because money was coming from the government. All of these become politically unfeasible and governments go into a crisis. You can see this today in Venezuela, where there are actual riots all over the streets, there's hyperinflation and people are starving, frankly for no fault of theirs. It's just that the government has been eating up the children's inheritance and making it feel like, a very happy state of affairs. Oil prices have crashed and they can no longer do this. We must avoid this mistake. Lastly, there's a very practical reason for insisting that all the money goes to the permanent fund. Just imagine if we had a situation where, let's say, 90% went to the permanent fund and 10% went to the government. A few years later, what would happen is that there would be some sort of a budget crisis in the government, because the government would keep on spending until its deficit became very large. And then the government would say, hey, now we need to build this urgent bridge across this river because it's going to collapse and we don't have money. So why don't we reduce the permanent fund share from 90% to 80%, and 20% goes to the budget. And slowly you would find, even if you started with the 99% to the permanent fund, over time you would reach a situation where only 1% would be going to the permanent fund or nothing in it. Only 100% going to the permanent fund can be protected, because that's an absolute standard. There's no way to decide whether 99-1 is better than 50-50 or 199. This has consequences. Alaska only deposits 25% of its money from oil in the permanent fund, and 75% goes into the budget. And Alaska has suffered from the same crisis that Venezuela and Saudi Arabia have. At the peak of their oil boom, their government budget swelled from $2 billion to $8 billion. Well, right now what's happened is, with the oil crash, the amount of money they're getting from oil and all other taxes has come down to $3 billion, but expenses are sitting at $8 billion. What does the politicians want to do? They want to dip into the permanent fund, because where else will they get money? Alaska is one of the few states in the US which doesn't have an income tax, and the politicians would rather dip into the permanent fund than impose an income tax. So the best option is to put everything into the permanent fund. It's the right thing to do. So another question comes, similar question, why not put all the money, why don't we send the money why do we send the money as a citizens dividend? Norway, for instance, returns the money from the permanent fund to the budget. Wouldn't that be fairer? Well, the answers to this are somewhat similar to the idea of why we should put 100% into the permanent fund. But the first and most important reason for the citizens dividend is to link the citizen to the mineral, to create that sense of ownership between the two. If money doesn't go into the permanent fund or doesn't get distributed as a citizens dividend, this link will be broken. Some of the other reasons to pay out the citizens dividend include not paying it out would be equivalent to a per head tax. Giving it to the government would reduce the quality of governance. Another question we get is this permanent fund a new idea? It turns out no, it's not a new idea. There are over 50 of these permanent funds all over the world. The very first permanent fund was set up as long back as 1876 by Texas, which used its land, its public land, to create a permanent fund whose income was then used for funding the Texas university system. The next permanent fund that we know of was Kiribati from phosphates in 1955. The first oil fund was by Kuwait in 1974, and the largest fund today is the fund by Norway, which is using the money from North Sea oil, set up in 1990. As I said, over 50 of these funds already exist, but Goa's fund is unique. Goa's fund is the very first permanent fund in the country, as well as the very first fund which has been set up by judicial action by the Supreme Court. And this makes it especially powerful because as a judicial precedent, everywhere else people can go and quote the Supreme Court judgment and say, if Goa can have a permanent fund, why can't we? And this is something that all of Goa should be very proud of. Yet another question comes up, how can we manage the permanent fund in a way that the politicians don't steal from that money? It's a good question. We are in particular recommending that we use the National Pension Scheme to invest this money. There are a few reasons for this. Firstly, the National Pension Scheme has been set up at an all India level, and it's actually been set up, it's one of the best managed pension funds in the world. It's been set up in state-of-the-art methodology and best practices, and some of the technical infrastructure is also a very high quality. It's been set up to handle the pension funds for the entire nation, so handling Goa's accounts would be pretty simple. Also, the investments done by the pension fund are done by private investment managers who are competed against each other on a daily basis. You can see who's performing better or worse. So automatically there are very few reasons to obey or heed a politician's directive to put money into Malia's companies or anybody else's, because they know that the returns which would decline. Another protection is that most government employees all over the country have their retirement savings in the National Pension Scheme, and they would shout bloody blue murder if any of this money was being diverted or being mismanaged.